everybody to the August 10th Carver School Committee meeting. I'd like to open this meeting. It is 7 o'clock. Would you all join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, welcome everybody. Yeah, can I have Superintendent Neef do our Zoom policy reminder, please?
Just a reminder, this meeting is being broadcast live on Cable 15 in the auditorium at the middle high school, and then also via Zoom. Just a reminder to our Zoom participants, we just ask you to keep your videos off during the meeting, except if you are addressing during public comment, then we invite you to turn your video on. If you choose to, you don't have to. So that's just a reminder to everyone. And thank you, Ms. Carver.
All right. Thank you, Scott. And can I have comments on the EAPC, please?
It's going to be Jackie Perkins tonight speaking on behalf of the EAPC.
Through Zoom?
Through Zoom.
Okay.
I don't think she's here.
I just unmuted her.
Jackie, you should be unmuted.
She needs to
click. Okay, I assume everyone can hear me?
Oh, yes.
Am I ready to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, Jackie, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'll speak loudly just because I think my mic might not be loud enough.
No, you're fine.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Jackie, you're fine. We're actually turning you down in the room right now.
All right.
Just speak normally.
All right, thank you. Good evening to our school committee, our superintendents, and to all parents, teachers, and Carver community members who are in attendance. Tammy Johnson, our EAPC Vice President for Carver, could not be with us here tonight, so I rise to speak for our educational staff, not from her seat, but from my own as co-chair of the negotiations team, who is currently working with administration and the school committee to ensure the safety and well-being of the whole Carver community in the plan designs we're about to talk about. I think that you all heard Tammy speak last week. Her speech was a pretty intense and true speech, and it may have touched you. But her three-minute speech came first. It was followed by a long presentation that did not address the very real and serious concerns she raised because it was a plan for a presentation that was delivered. Following that, we heard a series of pre-prepared public opinions that also did not engage with any of the other opinions or the real concerns that are raised out there. To move forward, I think that in the future, when we have these forums, we need to have real dialogue that has the capacity to bring us together. So I would suggest that in the future, forums include all stakeholders with an opportunity to engage in conversation versus having isolated readings of positions. I'm not sure that it helped us move anywhere as a community, even though it was all really important to do. So the truth of all this whole thing that we're working on, is that your faculty and administration and your school committee has been working as hard as anyone can work to come up with these three plans and have all the answers as to how they would play out. It is also a truth that we don't have it all worked out. Teachers want to know and understand the air quality in their rooms before they subject themselves and your children to potentially spreading the disease here in Carver. They want to have the answers as to how 500 people in a building can safely take a mask break in the middle of a class without exposing all present to the spread of the disease. They want to have the answers as to how, when the usual 5% per day of students who are normally absent grows to 20% or more, because testing and quarantining are necessary, they're going to keep up, or going to be able to keep up with all the students and keep the students all on the same page. We are all watching the rest of our country, daring to risk their most vulnerable in school and thereby at home in order to be back in our buildings. We've seen the images in crowded hallways with no social distancing, followed by the positive test results in the same school. These stories are becoming commonplace now, and we should be learning from them. The truth is, children will not be returning to their former freedom in school this fall. They will have to wear masks, and they will not be hanging out in the hallways between class to socialize, because social distancing is impossible in these ways. They will not be going off into small groups and talking closely with each other in their classes, because masks alone don't prevent the spread. Distance is essential for that, and so is air exchange, and so is minimizing time spent together. These facts are not up for dispute. Parents, faculty, and students alike all need to accept this reality. Once we accept it, we can move on productively to maximize our children's education. Cases in Massachusetts are on the rise. Our governor addressed this just 2 days ago. Additionally, we now know that of the relatively few cases in kids, which gave us all a reason to feel comfortable, that 25% of those cases in kids are since returning to school this summer. That annihilates the idea that children are not susceptible and therefore not the ones to worry about. Our children didn't get it because we protected them by shutting down. If we open up in person when it's not safe to do so, we're going to be in trouble. School staff and students and family members are going to be exposed, get sick, and some may potentially die. For what? For a couple of weeks in person before we go to a fully remote model? That's what's happening around our country. We can safely begin the year remotely, not the spring remote plan, which was a very hastily put together plan by people who were shocked and amazed, but the one that we've worked so hard for this summer. We can use the month of September to be vigilant for our students to make the best decision for when it's time to go to the hybrid model, and then phase students in as the virus is under control. This plan is the only plan that assures the most time on learning for our kids, because it means that we won't be making the transition just after being into school for 2 weeks. And for avoiding a death error, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna read that sentence again because it's kind of an important sentence. This plan is the only plan that assures the most time on learning for our kids and for avoiding a deathly error in judgment about when it's safe to re-enter the building in person. This will, no doubt, be the hardest school year yet for most people. We implore you not to make that even more stressful, even more anxiety-ridden for both students and faculty alike, and complicated by forcing a full in-person or a hybrid in-person plan before we actually have all the answers that we need. Having said that, the educators for Carver Public Schools support a recommendation to return learning remotely to start with a phased-in hybrid model based on the necessary data that is, as of right now, trending in the wrong direction. When we have the answers we need about how to mitigate the spread of virus in school and out, we will be ready to risk the health and safety of everyone, knowing that it was not a gamble that we made with too many unknowns. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jackie. Okay. Now we're going to move to comments from the general public. If anybody does have a comment, either in person or on Zoom, I ask that you keep it to around 3 minutes if you can. If there is anything you've already heard and it's just repetitive information, you might want to just kind of keep that if you've already heard it said. And I will go to an in-person speaker first. If anybody would like to speak, come to the mic here, please. Oh, and also, if you do come to the mic, keep 6 feet apart, and when you get to the mic, you can take your mask off. No one? Okay, I'll go to Zoom if we have a participant.
We don't yet.
We don't yet? No? Nothing?
I see someone waving,
Someone's physically waving?
physically waving.
All right, who's that?
Lauren, is that what it says?
Lauren.
And now she's holding her hand up.
Wait a minute, actually, Meredith, how would you like to, or Scott, how would you like to is it up there?
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to go over those pieces really quickly, or you want me to?
So, it's-
Yeah, so if anybody wants to speak, they should please message Meredith in the Zoom with your name and address,
okay,
and then Meredith will recognize you.
Okay, it looks like she's typing.
all right, so you see her, Scott, Lauren,
I see
Yeah.
Laura.
Meredith?
Lauren Jazerski, 25 Williams Drive. Lauren, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, thank you. You also pronounced my name correctly. That was amazing.
Yay!
I just wanted to speak for a moment as a member of the community who is high risk. I'm also a teacher, just not in this town. And I did write to school committee, but I just ask that you listen one more time as you consider what's available to high risk families. So I'm speaking as both a high-risk teacher, but also as a high-risk mother of 3 children in Carver Public School System. I know I've written to each of the Carver School Committee members and spoke with Mr. Neef on the phone, but I would ask that you keep in mind families like mine who can't return to in-person learning until it's safe. As a high-risk teacher, I have concerns about what you're asking faculty and families to do in the middle of a pandemic. We can't do a full return. We can't say that what's keeping our society safe right now, with 6 feet apart, masks, and limits on indoor and outdoor gatherings, just goes out the window so that everyone can return to school. 3 feet isn't safe and shouldn't be acceptable for our children if it's not acceptable anywhere else outside of a school building. While students in a hybrid would only see their teachers once or twice a week, teachers, especially in the upper level grades, and specialist teachers would be exposed to almost all of the entire school population. I know I teach 6 classes of 25 plus and advisory, and would be monitoring students during passing while simultaneously sanitizing my room and prepping during passing. This small in-person interaction with staff still isn't worth the risk to students and families who are immunocompromised or suffer other health conditions. Because I'm high risk, my children are stuck in remote learning regardless of whatever goes. We do not have a choice. It's not something we are electing. Due to my health, my family's being cautious about limiting the possibility of exposure, and I know I'm not the only family in this situation in this community. By outsourcing the remote learning option and teaching, Carver will be inadequately addressing students' needs for robust instruction. Edgenuity not only offers, or only offers, the 4 core subjects with no specialists, and nothing that addresses the social emotional needs for children during this crisis. What's being offered is so limited, it undermines the quality of middle and high school education. There's no foreign language, there's no electives, AP, or tech. I'm not sure about the elementary program, but I'm sure it will not provide nearly the same level of engagement or rigor or care that Carver Elementary was able to provide my children when given no time this last spring to quickly switch over to remote learning. It was specialists during remote learning at Carver Elementary who created the Heroes Run IT video, virtual art show, and other projects that were school-wide and offered engagement in a time of great isolation and brought the school community together. It was my daughter's health teacher in 6th grade who constantly gave social emotional check-ins and journal writing as a way to get a read on how students were really doing at home. I know Mr. Neef has reassured me that my children will still be allowed to participate in school-wide projects, which I'm grateful for, but I want them more than anything to be with their Carver teachers and Carver classmates. And the only way that can happen is if we go remote, or if Carver runs the remote learning. It would be amazing, if you could be amazing for my kids with no planning, take those first 10 days to prep and please make it spectacular. As I said in my letter, this is a small town with a big heart, and Carver Public Schools embodies that message. It takes a village to raise a child, and we need to move forward this school year together. No one should be left behind with substandard as their only remote educational option. Students, teachers, and families with high-risk members should be considered as decisions are made. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Anybody else from the in-person audience? No? Anyone else on Zoom?
Nope.
No? Okay, seeing no more public comment, we move on to recommendations from the superintendent, the plan for reopening of school.
All right, thank you, Mr. Catarelli. So first, I'd just like to take a moment just to thank everybody. So I did this at the last meeting, but we had a lot of people within the community who were involved in developing the 3 plans that we put forward to the committee, and that the committee's asked to make a decision on tonight. But I again like to thank our teachers, staff members, administrators, parents, representatives from the town who are all participating in the creation of the plans. I also want to thank everyone for their feedback since last Wednesday. So I think the members of the committee would agree. We've gotten a lot of feedback since last Wednesday's presentation, through emails, through phone calls. We've had a lot of conversations with members of the community, sharing their thoughts and their concerns about how we should proceed. We appreciate all those comments, and I know that through my conversations with the school committee since last Wednesday, I can attest that they've been really diligent in terms of reading everything that was sent to them, raising questions about it, and being really thoughtful about all the information that's been provided to them. So I want to thank the members of the committee for their dedication and their time in terms of doing that. So thank you to everybody, and with that, I'm going to go forward with the recommendations of the administration. But before we go there, I want to actually look at the survey results. So we did survey the parents in the community and staff. The first results here are the responses to the staff survey. And so the question was, based on the 3 reopening models presented to the school committee, which model would you select for a return to school next year? The survey was offered out to all of our staff who works within the building. So there's a breakdown on the left-hand side of their role, from teacher to administrative assistant. And we can see it's a very divided result a little bit. 49.5% of the staff saying that they would favor or support a full remote model at this time. 36.8% a hybrid model return, alternating groups, 2 days in school, 3 days remote. And 13.7% a full in-person return. Obviously, I don't need to do the math for everybody, but in terms of some in-person versus full remote, it was pretty much a 50-50 split amongst the staff. We had 182 respondents, so that's approximately 74% of the staff who were surveyed. Parents and families. We had 819 responses, and in this response question, we asked where they had students, and we may have asked that question a little bit better to get an exact count of the number of kids who were represented through the survey. So it's 819 families. We asked those families to identify if they had students in the elementary school, the middle high school, or both. Based on those responses, it represents between 950 and 1,000 students. So in terms of, it's a pretty good representation. Again, probably 65 to 70% of our total school parent population responded to the survey. And again, you can see is a very split response here. You can't get much closer than 38.9 to 38.3. So from the family survey, full in-person return was 38.9%, a hybrid return was 38.3%, and a full remote was 22.7%. We also asked the follow-up question about who would select to stay remote if an in-person model was selected. Obviously, a full in-person model return, something the committee has to consider is that a third of parents said in a full in-person return at this time, they would consider a full remote option. And 17% of parents in a hybrid model said they would consider a remote option. And I want to talk about the remote option a little bit, because ultimately this number plays a factor in what we can do as a district in terms of offering remote services. I know that our remote plan calls for all students to be placed on a learning platform. And I'm not saying I'm deviating from that plan here this evening in my presentation, but I will say that we're definitely open to looking at who those students are. So if any kind of in-person model was selected by the school committee, and really, actually, even if a full remote model was selected, parents would still have the option to pick full remote. And I'm going to try to have that make a little bit of sense. Because ultimately, I think the goal of the committee and the goal of the community is to transition towards students being back in school. There are some families that they may say, right now, the transition is just not an option for me. So I know I'm going to be full remote for the year. So even if the school committee voted, let's start remote for the first 3 months, we might have to still offer to families, is that something you're going to be interested in, or do you want a full year remote, if that makes sense? So we need to ask people that question, and no matter what gets voted here this evening, we're going to be putting out an application for families tomorrow to declare if they're interested in full remote. And when that application goes out, then we'll get a real sense of who the students are, what grades they're in, and then we can look at those numbers and make decisions. And if it makes sense, and where it makes sense, we're considering using Carver staff for in-person education. But we have to have those numbers match, because you don't want to undermine any kind of a hybrid in-person model by taking staff that would lead us to create bigger class sizes. So if we're taking staff to do all the remote teaching, that staff's being pulled away from doing the in-person teaching, and then you're making your class sizes bigger, and then you're degrading the success you're going to have in any kind of remote or a hybrid or in-person model. We have to balance all that out, and sometimes it's hard to make those decisions until you know what you know. There's things we don't know right now. So we need to know who is going to be there, who's going to select remote, what grades they're in, what classes they're going to be taking, what they're going to be doing, and we as a school administration are dedicated to looking at those students and then making determinations on where we can provide in-person services with our staff or where we might have to use the platforms. So the learning model is going to say you're going to be placed on a platform, but it's going to be a little more nuanced than that, and the administration is willing to look at those things. In terms of, I just want to make a little clarity for the committee, because a person raised this point during public comment. Certainly we can offer AP courses and foreign language courses and those types of courses, and tech courses and allied arts courses through Edgenuity, and actually we have to balance out, there's some other options you can do for those courses if someone was on a remote learning platform, so I don't want the community to think that those would be denied to students in those platforms. And then also in terms of social emotional supports, no, any student who required social emotional supports or needed it, we would still be looking to do that through our counseling staff. So if a family is fully remote, saying, I really think there'd be some benefit for a regular connection with the adjustment counselor in one of the school buildings, one of the guidance counselors, we would certainly provide that service through our staff, as we did through remote learning. So I just wanted to point those pieces of clarity for the committee in terms of the public comment. The only other thing I would say about the platform, Edgenuity, is it is aligned to the state standards. It was vetted by the Department of Education to align with the state curriculum standards. It also has a customization process where they would actually come in to meet with our content specialists, our department chairs, and ensure courses were aligned with what they're offering on the platform. So that does exist. And really, the reason why I hit on this piece of the survey, because either way, this is still a pretty big number. If the committee commits or moves with some sort of in-person model, whether it's hybrid or full in-person, it has to have a consideration of what's going to happen with this 17% who selected a remote model, and I wanted to provide a little more clarity around that concept. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments on the survey before we go into the actual recommendation from the administration.
Seeing none? Anyone? Okay.
Okay. So what we're going to propose this evening is a phased reopening, use metrics and guidance to determine transition between phases. Now, I'll go back a slide. No, not two slides. Go back one slide. And I know at the last meeting on Wednesday, and so many things are so hard during this process because it is in transition. It's always changing. The information's always new. And so last week I said that the Department of Education is working with the Department of Public Health in Massachusetts to establish metrics that school districts could use to determine their phases of return. And I will say the department's been very good at giving us what they say they're going to give us. And I've mentioned a few times, so sorry, my wife says I like to be repetitive. Sometimes I get a little repetitive, so I apologize for that. But
can you repeat that?
Maybe lose my train of thought. I'll come back. Is in terms of, DESE's really good at giving us what they say they're going to give us. But the timeline's sometimes off. So they're saying they're going to produce metrics for school districts to use to look at phases for return. I don't have those metrics with me tonight. I'm not going to present a metric to the committee that I'm going to recommend that we use. They're saying we're going to have that metric in the next week or two, which maybe that means 3 weeks. And what I would propose is that the next time the committee meet, hopefully we'd have some establishment from the Department of Education to review to determine what that metric is. That being said, I will throw a couple things out there that have been discussed a little bit. So one is on May 12, 2020, the World Health Organization advised governments that before reopening, rates of positivity in testing should remain at 5% or lower for at least 14 consecutive days. So that's a possible number you could use. You could also look at the positivity data for this area, for Plymouth County, and then the actual number of positive cases within Carver or within Plymouth County. So if you look at this, Johns Hopkins actually updates this information daily. So this is their website. This is from updated at 3 a.m. this morning, positivity per state. And then they put states in green or yellow in terms of their reopening. And Massachusetts is currently in the green, and our positivity rate for the past 14 days is 2.45%. Last week, actually, last Friday, it was 2.88, so we're down a little bit since last Friday. And this is just tracking the rate of positive tests that happen throughout the state of Massachusetts. I know that testing, that data also is available at the state level and can be broken down. They update it weekly by community. I will say that that information, I didn't pull it up in a slide. I just wanted to know people that information is out there, and it's data we can look at. Sometimes I know that, and I've been talking to the Board of Health, specifically I talked to them on Friday about this, and I also talked to our tracker, or the Board of Health did and relayed it to me. They had a conversation with Meg Payne from Visiting Nurse Association of Cape Cod, who is currently our person who's doing tracing and tracking. And they said that sometimes the numbers in the state report don't always align with the numbers in what the Carver Board of Health has. They didn't give me they didn't give me specific information on why those numbers may be different. And I asked them to look into that to see if we could get some information on that. I know that last week's report said there had been 5 positive tests in the last 14 weeks in Carver, and less than 5 active cases. You know, the Carver Board of Health, as of Friday afternoon, was confirming through their tracker and tracer that there's only been 2 positive cases in Carver since July 1st. That information is contradictory, and I'm not looking to vie for which one is right, and the Board of Health isn't looking to say that they didn't give me reasons why there might be a conflict in that data. But my point being, these are all things we can work at. We're going to be working with the Carver Board of Health to establish a metric. And the phases that we're going to talk about in terms of reopening, I'd like to propose to be based on a metric like something from Johns Hopkins, like the information from the state, like the tracking data from the Department of Health. I'm not making an official proposal on what the metric is tonight, just saying we would use one to transition. Jen, I think I saw you put your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that according to Art Borden and Michael Ryan, that they believe the state is tracking number of tests. So if a person is test positive and they need to have a negative test to come out of quarantine, they may get tested 2 or 3 times. If 2 of their tests are positive, then the state is recording 2, but the Board of Health is reporting 1 because it is the same case. And so that is why there's a discrepancy between the state numbers and the town's Board of Health reporting, because the town Board of Health is reporting actual number of cases and the state is reporting number of positive tests.
Thank you. And just for clarity, Art Borden is the Carver Board of Health Chairman, and Kevin, what's his last name?
Michael Ryan. Kevin Forg is the health agent.
Yeah, he is our health agent. Sorry, I didn't get his last name.
Yeah. And again, so we would base our phases based on a metric in which we can work on establishing what the metric is. So what's our recommended phase reopening? And I'm going to present the committee with 2 options that the administration can support this evening. Option A would be a remote start from September 16th to September 30th. We would have pre-K and selected special education and high needs students start in person right away on September 16th. And the concept behind the remote start for 2 weeks is that there is some concerns that the data seems to be tracking higher in Massachusetts over the last few weeks. There's concerns that there's been a lot of summer travel and a lot more interaction over the summer, and that it would really give the month of September to trace the data, track the data, and make sure that we don't have a spike within the Carver community, or within southeastern Massachusetts, really. Because ultimately our staff comes from, not everyone comes exactly from Carver. And so this is a method we could support as the administration for the community to weigh on. And really, because of what the Department of Education did by taking 10 school days away and doing 10 days of professional development for teachers, it really, those 10 days plus an additional 2 weeks brings you through the whole month of September to track to see if we really are moving towards a spike. Then we would say as of October 1st, we would begin our hybrid return, which is a Thursday. Sorry, October 1st is it is a Thursday. So students would return in person for the first time, the group cohort B, on that Thursday. Now, very interesting, I will say that this presentation, as all things, has gone through some changes even during the day. And originally, I had established some firm deadlines, some dates for each phase, for each transition. And ultimately, if the committee wants me to do that, that's something I could work on for our next meeting, or we as a committee could even talk about establishing firm dates this evening. But when I looked at the dates, I started to feel they're really arbitrary. And it's so hard in the future to, but I also think you need to have milestones and you need to have a place to check in. So for example, the next phase would be a K-2 return and bring in all of our students K through 2, with our feeling being that our youngest students are most at risk for not being in person. Obviously all of our students are developing skills, but our K1 and 2 students, their skill development is so essential to them in terms of their education that it is more challenging to do some of those things remotely. And I'm not saying it can't be done remotely, it certainly can, but it's definitely more challenging. And also based on the reality of, and I'm going to support the recommendation a little bit more through some of the following slides, is that there still seems to be that younger students are less likely, are less susceptible to the disease. The data still tracks that. So we'd start with our younger kids and then move forward with our older kids. So K2 return in person, where 3 with 12 would remain hybrid. If we did that successfully and we stayed on the metrics and our numbers stayed low, then we would return 3 through 5. 6 with 12 would remain hybrid. Same concept. If the numbers do well, we're bringing more people back in, we're meeting with success. And then we can move towards a 6 through 12 full return in person. And as I said, I had dates on here. So the K2 return was November 1st. It was kind of a month at a time, taking a look, watching the data. And as I said, I felt as I thought about it that maybe that seemed a little arbitrary and we almost need to take it a month at a time, and even in terms of establishing what our transitions would be. But ultimately, as I said, if the committee was to support one of these two options and wanted to really clarify some timelines for either for this evening or for our next meeting, we could certainly do that. The most important decision here for tonight is the start piece. Do you start remote for a couple of weeks, track the data, see what's happening, see if there's been a summer surge, or do you just start with the hybrid model? So option B, very similar format, but it's not starting with any type of remote start. It's starting with the hybrid model, K through 12, with, again, pre-K and selected special education, high-needs students starting in person, and then phasing in our other grades as we meet success in person. So what's my rationale behind this? We've already started a phased reentry a little bit in terms of summer school, and I don't think we've talked about this enough in any of our meetings. On July 1st, all year-round employees return to work in an in-person model. So that's 38 staff members, including administrators, administrative assistants, and clerks, custodians, maintenance, technology staff. During the first closure, our central office building stayed open 2 days a week, and then we worked remotely 3 days a week. But as of July 1st, I've been back in the district every day, and as our staff has been. We've also run an in-person summer school this year, from July 13th to August 12th. Summer school's been 3 days a week, Monday through Wednesday. We've had 34 students attend in person, and we've had 25 staff members, including teachers, ESPs, which are educational support professionals, and bus drivers. The number's a little high there because we also have had some students who are intensive special needs students who attend out-of-district placements, and our bus drivers have been driving them. So they're not counted in our 34 students in person in our buildings because they're not coming to our building, but we have had drivers driving some out-of-district students to out-of-district placements. So ultimately, I think that adds up to 97 people. Now, have all 97 of those people been coming to work at the exact same time, at the exact same moment, in the exact same building? No. But this is a phased start of reentry, and knock on wood, we have a couple days left. We've been very successful. We have had, knock on wood's behind me. Yeah, I did that. we have not had a COVID-related incident in our summer school programs. So we've begun. That was the first step of a phased reentry. Ultimately, why are we supporting hybrid? And some of the slides I'm going to show is this is from that the Parabola group that I talked about last week, the parabolaproject.org, from the Airdyne Labs, which is from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and also Brigham and Women's Hospital. And they've looked specifically at, so this is over, a team of over 110 physicians, nurses, researchers, data scientists, implementing specialists, who have looked at returning to school in Massachusetts. So this is not a national study. This is about returning to school in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And they're saying we need to have a balanced view of risk. And obviously there is the risk of COVID-19, but there's all these other risks for students for not being in school. And that we need to be considerate of all those things. As I said, I'm not going to read this slide to you, but the loss of learning, the social emotional impacts, the reduced detection of child abuse, the nutritional insecurity, the loss of parental employment, the lack of essential services. All these things need to be taken into account. And what's the principles behind the project? Individuals can transmit the virus before they show symptoms, even if they never develop symptoms. As we talked about a little bit, children under 10 have milder cases of COVID-19, and current research suggests they spread the virus less than adults. Emerging research indicates that children 10 to 19 may transmit the virus similarly to adults. So schools so far do not appear to be a main epicenter of COVID transmissions. Transmissions seem to be related more to droplets in the air when people cough, sneeze, talk, or sing than touching contaminated surfaces. Transmission is decreased with physical distancing, smaller gatherings, wearing face masks, isolating at home when you're sick. Those kind of key principles. And basic public health practices of washing hands, disinfecting surfaces, and immunizations are all critical to reducing the spread of COVID-19 and other illnesses. And I'm going to skip ahead to a slide to talk about the principles. And these are all slides I've been using in my presentation. This was from the original DESE presentation about returning to school and fall reopening guidance. That if we look at these principles of masks and face coverings, physical distancing, hand washing, and staying home when sick, if we practice these things and we do these things and we establish protocols around these ideas, that it is safe for students, staff, faculty to return to schools. And when I go back to the slide, when they talk about principles, the principles are used in combination for health decisions around reopening. No single principle will effectively lower risk alone. And we won't be able to do all these principles perfectly all the time. So it's a combination of doing all of those things, masks, distancing, etc. And if we do them all to the best of our ability, we're going to minimize risk. These principles work together to decrease the risk of transmission, and the more we follow these principles, the lower the risk. We cannot reduce the risk of COVID transmission to zero. Some risks remain even if with maximum adherence to those concepts. And really, why hybrids? Why are we selecting either a hybrid or remote to start? And it really comes down to the 6 feet. And the Parabola project is clearly advocating, I'll take right from their slide. We believe the minimum of 6 feet should be the goal in all settings and situations. We recognize 6 feet cannot be maintained at all times, but if individuals come in contact closer than 6 feet, an effort should be made to get back to the 6 foot distance. Distance and risk are related. More distance above 3 feet reduces risk. Older children are at higher risk than younger children, which makes distancing even more important at the middle and high school level. And this whole concept of their data shows that there's a 13% risk of transmission from 0 to 3 feet, a 3% risk of transmission from 3 to 6 feet, and a less than 3% risk of transmission beyond 6 feet. And ultimately, right now, in terms of a full in-person return, the Carver Public Schools cannot meet we can't meet the 6 foot social distancing requirement if all students returned in full. We can meet the 3 or 4 foot social distancing requirement. In a hybrid model, which is the recommendation here, either start hybrid or start remote and transition to a hybrid, in that hybrid model, we can maintain or set up structures to maintain 6 feet of social distancing. And we've talked about all these things before, but we'll just do some representation of this. So I know that it was out a little bit on social media this week that the school committee went in and looked at different rooms. We've set up different rooms around the building. In general, this isn't specific, doesn't cover every classroom at the middle high school, but in general, the classrooms at the middle high school have these types of desks, or a second type of desk I'll show you. So this is a high school classroom that is set up with 23 desks, and these are set at 4 feet apart. The 4 feet is from the center of the desk to the center of the desk, center of the chair, center of the chair. And then front of desk to front of desk. So I don't know if you guys can, I don't know if you can see my pointer. I need a pointer. So from front of the table to front of the table is 4 feet. From the center of the chair to the center of the chair is 4 feet. And in this setup, we can get 23 desks in most classrooms. Now, the middle high school has some unusual rooms. This is a typical classroom in this building. Some are bigger, some are smaller. There's some rooms we could get more, some we can get less. But on a general average at 4 feet, we can do 20 to 23 desks per room. This is the classroom next door, which has the same tables. These are set up at 6 feet. So it's 6 feet from the front to the front. Same thing, 6 feet from center to center. And in this room, we have 15 desks that we could set up at 6 feet of social distancing. And in a hybrid model, most of our classes, when your hybrid group is going to be in, is going to be smaller than that. You're going to be smaller than 15. You're going to be, our average class size in middle high school is around 20. Now, the classes at that level may not break down evenly. So, for example, I think, I know there's one of our AP courses that has 19 students, and it's not a natural, it's not a 10 and 9. So you could have a situation where one singleton class of 19 could be 13 and 6. And so the one group might be only 6 students in that class. But we're going to, and obviously we would set up each classroom in the real setting in a hybrid model based on the number of the largest number of students in that class. So if this teacher, their largest hybrid cohort was 11, we'd set this room up for 11 desks and not have 15. Obviously, if that changed, then we'd make adjustments. But we just wanted to show you the max you could get in each room. The other style of desk that we have in the middle high school is sort of like this. And there were tables in several classrooms in the middle high school. We realized we can't use the tables. We actually have purchased more traditional desks like this for those rooms that had tables. This was set up at 3 feet by 5. So it's 5 feet from the front of the desk to the front of the desk. It's 3 feet from center to center. That's what made sense in this room with this style desk to be a typical setup. You wouldn't go less than 3 feet because it'd be too close. We wouldn't set it up that way in a normal, and if everybody was back and everything was normal times, we wouldn't set some desks up that close. So this is very traditional. The other point I want to mention is the guidance is that all desks have to be facing forward to the point of instruction. There has to be at least 6 feet from the board to the first desk. We did that in each of the classrooms. It's not as clear here because of the way we took the pictures, but we did do that as a setup. So this room does have 24 desks with a 3 by 5 setup. This is a middle high school classroom, again, typical size, with 6 feet of social distancing. Again, 6 feet from the front of the desk to the front of the desk, center of the chair to the center of the chair. This room has 14 desks in it, and again, same concept as we talked about before, that we would, whatever the maximum number of desks we need in a room is what we put in there, and we'd set it up for that. Elementary school. So the elementary school classrooms are very typical. So they're all the same size except for the preschool and the kindergarten. Those classrooms are a little bit bigger. So this is a 3rd grade classroom. This was set up at 4 feet of social distancing. So the 4 feet from, I guess I'm getting too repetitive on this, so I'll say it. This is the last time I'll say it. From the front of the desk to the front of the desk, and from the center of the chair to the center of the chair. And it's a little over 6 feet in the front. It's actually almost 7 feet from the point of instruction to the first setup of the desk. 6 feet would actually be a little too close. We don't normally have it set up. This same thing, we can fit 24 desks in this classroom based on this setup, and could be a traditional type of setup, all desks facing the point of instruction. I think the only thing we took out of this room was a horseshoe table. So there's a horseshoe table here in the back. It has some boxes on it. There was another horseshoe table in this classroom which I believe we took out. Classroom across the hall, 3rd grade, and this is set up at 6 feet. And we have 14 desks in this room set up at 6 feet. So again, you get to see that difference. And the reason why I took some time on this, because I guess I just want everybody to understand that the 6 feet of social distancing really became the key for our recommendation. So ultimately, we're believing that as a school district, it's important for us to maintain that 6 feet of social distancing. And that there is a difference between regularly maintaining 3 feet of social distancing and regularly maintaining 6 feet of social distancing. And if we want to take it slow, if we want to ensure that we're doing this, that things are going to work and everyone's going to be able to stay safe, it makes sense to start in a hybrid model following the guidelines of 6 feet of social distancing versus the guideline of 3 feet of social distancing. So ultimately that is our recommendation, is that we start in a hybrid model and that we phase into an in-person return based on following metrics. The administration could support either option A of starting remote for 2 weeks to see if there is a spike in the community during the month of end of August and the beginning of September. The administration could also support starting the hybrid model on September 16th with the goal of setting transitional dates, assuming that the metrics are positive and moving forward. So with that, I turn it over to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Neef. For our members, going forward, before anybody suggests a motion, instead of making motions for all 3 options, if anyone has a motion or would like to make the motion on the recommendation of the administration, we can do that and second the motion for discussion purposes. At any time, someone could make an amendment to that motion. Then we could discuss that and approve or disapprove that amendment. So we could do that. That's probably the cleanest way to do this, and we can continue to do that through all 3 models, if anybody has that inclination. So with that, I would entertain a motion to open this up for discussion, if anybody would like to make one.
I'll make a motion that we adopt option A of the phased reopening plan as presented by Superintendent Neef.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and that would be,
The remote start.
right. So that would, so there was option B, you said? A? Okay. Okay, thoughts, discussion?
Sorry, Andy, we've had a few people mention that on Zoom they're having trouble hearing everybody. So the Zoom participants are getting their sound from the speakers. So if we can really make sure we lean into our mics and speak loudly and clearly, that'd be great. And I'll see if we can put a little more volume on the back too.
Okay, so we
If
have
you can
a,
ask me a question.
thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second to return to school with option A, a remote start for September 16th through September 30th. Discussion, questions, comments? Jason?
All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Do I have to take this thing off?
No, you're good.
You guys, I'm good? All right. You're going to hear this sentiment a lot, but this is not easy. We've received dozens of communications, emails, phone calls, texts, in person, whatever it may be. And I can't speak for the rest of the committee, but I've lost sleep over this, coming up with the right decision. Most of the communications, most of the communications have shown empathy toward what we have to go through, and I appreciate that, but there have been some that say your only responsible decision is to choose blank, whether it be hybrid, in-person, remote. I think right now, the remote start is the way to go. And I mean, if I look out at this crowd, I see 14 people, and there are 275 at home. 19 people on Wednesday and 228 max. I think that right there is a telling statistic alone, that people feel more comfortable in a remote environment than in an in-person environment. I would like to make an amendment to this motion that adds to be reevaluated on, at the August 27th meeting.
I'll second.
Okay.
And can I continue discussion on that?
Go ahead, I have
The purpose on that is that so we can have some extra time, some more metrics to see, are we able to go hybrid on the 1st of October? Because it's going to change every two, I know it's coming up later in the agenda, but we're proposing to meet more often. And I think this is the main reason, is to continue to go over what we see, what are the metrics, what can we do. And I had this big, long thing planned about the remote option, with students not being able to interact with teachers, and what Scott said earlier kind of just detracted everything I was going to say. So I'm glad that that's a thing. To see potentially up to 30% of our students not with a Carver teacher is something that we need to address. I want to see as many people, as many families in front of a Carver teacher somehow, some way, as often as possible. So that's where I'll start, and I'll yield.
Okay, James?
So I'm actually opposed to this and would prefer option B, and I'd like to explain why. And I will begin with reiterating what you said. We had a lot of emails, and I read every single one of them, some of them more than twice. And if you wrote an email, you wrote a lot, and so did everybody else who wrote one of those emails. And it is a lot of time, but we took the time to do that and be diligent with that and understand what people said. And I think with a lot of this information, the emails were split. It was pretty split. But what I will say, and why promote option B, 74% of the staff replied to your survey, and only 50% of them wanted to go remote. The other 50% chose one of the other two options. 74% of parents responded to the email or the survey that we did previously about remote learning, and whether it was in the spring and organized or not, the point was the difficulty with getting kids to do what they were supposed to do in an at-home situation. 74% of the people were either somewhat bothered or extremely confused. It was really hard. And it's not just because it was thrown out, it was because that's a very difficult platform that as a society, we're not fully ready for yet, for kids to actually independently take that learning. And parents really struggled with that. 22% of the people, 22% of the families said that the remote learning went well. And in my daughter's case, I agree. In my son's case, I don't agree. It was difficult. We struggled through the whole thing. And I was there remote learning with my group at the same time. But only 50% of the staff is looking for that remote learning. Now, as a voice, we collectively represent the voice of Carver. 819 families responded, and 78% of them want their kids in school in one way or another. 78%. Now, if they are in school, those people that replied, 83% of them would send their children in a hybrid model. So you're saying that 83% of the families would send their kids into school right now because our numbers are very low, and because this is the time to put kids in before. Because you, as an elementary teacher, it's all about climate. And remote working does not work. I cannot create a culture and an expectation as well as I should be able to with a child that's sitting at home. And the families in Carver are speaking up, saying that 819 of them responded to that. And 83% wanted their children back in school. We have between now and September 16th to reevaluate what happens with data and with cases and with spikes. We have a full month of time to relook at this. But if we choose to go remote now, right away, you're taking away the option from 83% of those families that want their kids to go back into school. You're making them remote. If you go hybrid, you have a choice to keep your family remote. And I think one of the things we really need to focus on, and you need to as an administration, is making sure that there are outlets from Carver staff. Because we are going to have high-risk staff members. And those high-risk staff members can work remotely with those kids that need to be remote. And those kids should have opportunities to interact in morning meetings or in other things that are happening that they can be a part of. And I think that should be a priority if remote learning is chosen. But if you go full remote, then we're right back to where we left off, regardless of that time that's spent and the plans that are made. And I think you're going against what most of the families in this district are looking for. So I will not support option A, but I will support option B.
All right, moving forward, we have an amendment, yeah, I'll get you in a second, Jen. We have an amendment on the floor right now and a second to amend the original motion. Before any other amendments are taken, I want to go through the process of going with that one. And if you have an amendment you'd like to make, James, or anyone else, you can make it, but I think we should vote this one first, unless you have anything
Well,
pertinent
I
to
didn't
that.
want to make an amendment, Andy, but I wanted my point of view heard because if I'm going to vote no on option A, then I want it understood why.
But you can, what I'm saying is you could, if you feel that way, you could make an amendment, offer an amendment to.
How could I make an amendment? My amendment would be
No,
to choose
yeah,
option
right.
B.
So
I can't make
the
an
committee
amendment.
currently
We have
has
to
an
vote yes or
amendment.
no.
Right,
The committee has a motion and amendment before it. They should act on the amendment that's been, before taking any other business, they should act on the
So that's what
amendment
I'm
that's
saying
before
is
them.
after that, you could actually, someone else could offer another amendment to
Okay.
the original motion. So that's what I was saying, if anybody else had anything pertinent to Jason's point of
So
revisiting this.
your motion was only to relook at it at our August 27th.
That was the amendment to, yeah, that
so
was the only
The
amendment.
the
to-
motion is still for option A, so.
Right,
Yep.
so, but we're going to be taking up the amendment right now. This isn't a final vote
Right.
on the option.
Yep.
All right, does anybody else have any discussion on the amendment?
I have discussion on both the motion with the amendment.
Okay, go ahead.
So, similar to James, I would like to offer support for option B.
Point of order.
And I,
Go ahead, Jason, sorry, Jim.
Sorry, Jen, but if we're just talking about the piece of doing the conversation, sorry. Right now, I think the discussion should only be about just adding that timeline, and then once that passes or fails, then we can go back
So
and
let's
and
vote.
support
Correct,
A
so
versus
we
B.
should, yeah,
Let's vote on
procedurally, we
it.
should take up the amendment first,
Okay,
and
I
the
thought you
body
had
should
something
take some action on the amendment.
I thought
Right.
you had something pertinent to that.
So after we vote on the amendment, then we can go back to why you
okay,
want
so
A
we're
or
only
B.
voting on adding, we're not voting for option A, because I've.
No, right
Right,
now, it's just
right.
to add that to the motion.
Right.
That's the only thing.
We'll only be taking up the amendment. We're not taking
So
up
let's
the
take a
original
vote.
motion.
Right. And
All
then
right.
after that amendment's done, then we can go back to
Okay.
A versus B.
Okay,
And so just, I guess the Zoom audience is still having some trouble hearing the members. They're obviously they're hearing me very well because I'm the Zoom host. So if you'd like me to at least read the amendments so they know what the two motions are. So do you have written down?
well, it's the original, well, I just have.
Should we move to your mic during discussion then?
To be reevaluated at the August 27th
Well,
meeting.
I'm
You
not,
can't read that.
I'm not looking at the Zoom feedback too much, Meredith. I don't know how much Zoom feedback we're getting about not being able to hear.
That's it.
But they can't hear any members, or can they?
They were asking to know who was speaking, so maybe.
Oh, so maybe
Yeah,
we
so
just
we
need
can go
to
back
say
to
our
address
names.
us, we have to,
identifying yourselves.
Okay.
We had talked about that last time. For the
Okay.
Zoom audience, it'd be beneficial if you identified yourself before speaking. And just as a clarity, so we know where we are. So we had an original amendment to adopt option A, which is on the board, and a second on that amendment. Sorry, we had an original motion to adopt option A with a remote start from September 16th to September 30th and a hybrid return on October 1st. We had a second in support of that motion. Then we had an amendment to that motion, which the committee is currently discussing. The amendment would be to add that we would revisit the metrics and the decision to return to hybrid on October 1st at our August 27th meeting.
Yes, right.
And that
So
was
the current
seconded?
discussion is on the amendment,
And that was seconded?
and that amendment was seconded.
That, yes.
So the current discussion is on the amendment to say that we would revisit the hybrid return on October 1st on the August 27th meeting if the main motion was approved.
All right. So do we have any other discussion on the amendment only?
No, but I say we do a roll call vote just for the purpose of the Zoom audience.
That's
Yeah.
what I do. Oh, yeah, and so if we're speaking, because we identify yourself before you speak. I'm Andrew Cottarelli, Chairman. All right, see no other discussion on the amendment. We'll start with you, Stephanie. Roll call vote?
Okay, so I'm voting on
The amendment.
the amendment.
Just the amendment to
Okay.
revisit it on the 27th.
Okay, Stephanie Clarity, aye.
James O'Brien, aye.
Jennifer Pratt, aye.
Jason Greenwood, aye.
And Andy Cottarelli, aye. Okay, so the amendment has been adopted to reevaluate at the August 27th meeting. Now, we go back to the original motion, and we can have further discussion on this. So Jen, now you can be recognized for that.
Thank you. Jennifer Pratt, school committee member. So as I was saying, I have some issues with option A. When all this started, I was in favor of a full return. I felt like our schools needed to be reopened. I also was very diligent in listening to everything that our community members had to say. And all of you have very excellent points. All of you have made very excellent points. Similar to James, I've had about 50-50 response. For every email begging me to reopen the schools, I have an email begging me to keep them closed. It puts us in a very difficult position. Yes, I've lost many nights of sleep. And I wake up dreaming about DESE and reopening schools, not something I thought I would have dreams about. When I toured the classrooms, it was eye-opening to me. We would have to have less than 60% of our student body to achieve 6 feet of distance. I don't feel comfortable putting any student in this town in a seat that is not 6 feet apart. I just don't. I can't. And so therefore, I will not vote for a model that will do that. We would need to have less than 60% of our student body to achieve 6 feet of distance in every classroom. I look at that classroom and I picture a teacher standing in front of, even with 70% of students, so you have 18 students in a classroom, and I see them being mask police, telling kids to keep their hands to themselves, because at 3 to 4 feet of distance, kids can still reach out and touch one another. And I see them constantly telling kids to keep their hands to themselves, to keep their masks on. How much quality learning is going to happen in that classroom? I don't want to put our teachers in that position, and I don't want to risk our students in that position. At 6 feet of distance or more, I see that kids will be able to be so much more attentive, and teachers will be able to have so much more quality learning. And I feel like if they're teaching a population of 10 kids, they'll likely be able to move their curriculum much more faster because they have a smaller audience and they can provide more one-on-one attention and more explanation for those kids that need it. And there are kids that need in-person teaching. There are kids that cannot connect through a computer. I know because one of my kids is that kid. One of my kids did great and one of my kids did not. And I've read many emails from many parents saying, please, my kid is on an IEP and is not so far along that they can do 4 days a week due to special education needs, but they need to be in the classroom. They don't connect on the computer. I feel like that is so important. And while I hear the reasonings for wanting remote learning, I also hear the majority of the parents that want some kind of in-person, and I don't feel it's my place to take their choice away. And I know that people have issues with our online remote learning platform, and they say, well, while I have a choice to go remote, I won't be with a Carver teacher. You guys are right. We have excellent staff in our district. We all live here because we love our schools and we love our teachers, and we are so lucky to have our teachers. And if we can work out a way to use our teaching staff better, to have them help do remote, I want to implore the administration that we need to look into those options. I received an email literally as I was leaving my house to come here tonight that was presenting a plan that a neighboring town is doing where they're using all staff to run their remote platform. And it will allow students who need to quarantine to move over to the remote and then back into the hybrid as needed. I don't know if we have the staff to do that, but I think we have time to research it. And meanwhile, I think while our rates are low, while our positives are low, while our town is relatively healthy, it is of utmost importance to get our kids to some capacity in the classroom to develop those connections. It's not going to be normal. Nothing about this is normal. This meeting isn't normal, but it's more normal than it was, and our kids need some semblance. My daughter had an outdoor dance recital, and they had to change their dances. They had to be 6 feet apart. They had to wear masks when walking around. She told me that it was the most normal she had felt in months, even though it wasn't normal. And our kids need that, a lot of our teachers need that, our town needs that, and so I'm firmly in support of option B. I don't think I can support option A unless something drastically changes in our town, and I'm totally open to reevaluating this every time we meet. This is a fluid situation. As things change, we as a school committee are going to be ready to react immediately and say, oh, nope, this isn't safe anymore. We want what's safe. We want to educate our kids.
Thank you very much, Jen. Anybody else have anything to say on this?
I will. Stephanie Clarity, Vice Chair, Carver School Committee. I made this motion to start remote for the first 2 weeks and then to return to the hybrid, to start the hybrid on October 1st, just to give us a little bit more time to look at the resulting data from the end of August, and to give the teachers some time to get going on the remote option. None of us know what the future holds, unfortunately. My thought process was if they had 2 weeks to get into a groove, to get into remote learning for all students by Carver staff, that would give them something to work off of in case when flu season starts and we have to change, because like Jen said, this is a very fluid situation. So if we then have to switch in a month or 2 months to a full remote, then the teachers would have something to build off of. So that was my thought process behind that. I agree, the students need to be in school when it's safe. I don't know if right now is the safest time, or if 2 weeks is the safest time, or if 6 months from now is going to be the safest time. I understand our cases are low, and that's great. I was just thinking in terms of the practice and the teachers having that. So, because they've done so much work from the spring till now in gearing up to go to full remote if we need to. So that was my thought process behind that, and I agree. Kids need to make those connections in person with their teachers and with their classmates in our new normal that we're faced with right now. So,
James O'Brien, I would just add to that, Stephanie. I think that, you know, the state has given 10 days to the district of PD before school begins. And I think preparation should be made for the fact that during flu season, we may end up remote again. I think that has to be part of a longer picture plan. Because I think, honestly, there's a strong inevitability that that's going to happen. That we're going to end up being remote once we have to close all the windows and turn the heat on and lock everything up. We don't right now. And that's why I support getting them in right now. Because the windows can be open, and the lack of ventilation that we have can at least be supported in the best possible way. And with a hybrid model, you're limiting the number of kids that are there. But you're allowing them to get in and get to know people and get to understand expectations and get to sort of get things down before something like that happens. I think as a district, we should be planning and preparing. This is a fluid situation. It's not like all of a sudden we're going to get to a point and we're going to be like, okay, we got it all figured out, because it's constantly going to change. And I think even if we go hybrid, there are options of things that we can do to improve hybrid as we move along. And it doesn't have to stay the way we said. This is going to be a very fluid situation that we're going to have to review very often and adapt to what the data gives us and adapt to what's going on and look at what's going on. And there's a lot of responsibility that's going to be put on people and accountability, because this is going to be hard to get kids to do what they're supposed to do. But it's going to be a lot easier with half of them here. You're minimizing the amount of people that are here. And I think it's again, 50% of the staff said yes and 50% said no to remote. So that's like an American election right there. 50-50 all the way down the road. The parents were not 50-50. It's clear the direction that they want to go, and I really think that it's our job to represent that voice.
All right, thank you, James. Excuse me? Yeah, yes, you can recognize and respond to Stephanie Clarity.
okay, Stephanie Clarity. I wholeheartedly agree. Option A just gives the first 2 weeks of being remote and then going to a hybrid. So it's just a 2-week delay of getting them in. And I understand, come August 27th, anything could happen by our next meeting, and we could have to change our vote then. And like Jen had said, we had talked about meeting bi-weekly, getting more information about the metrics when they're out on a regular basis from administration, so we can call a meeting if we need to and pivot as needed. So I am fully on board with all of that. So I just wanted to make that clear that
Sure.
I do hear the parents, I do hear the teachers, and I agree. My son needs to be back in school. He's that type of kid. He needs to make those connections because they're very valuable to his personality. So I just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion before we bring this to a vote? Now, this is going to be a vote on coming back to school in hybrid and starting remotely for the first 2 weeks after the state has already given additional, the first 10 days for PD. Yes, Jen?
I have an additional comment. Jennifer Pratt. A lot of people mentioned a phased reopening, and we should do a phased reopening, and I am in support of that, but I don't see the need for 2 weeks remote to start. When the state shut down, the schools shut down. Our state is partially reopened, and I feel it's really important to get our schools fully reopened. Partially reopened. Our state is not fully reopened, and therefore, we should not fully reopen, but getting our school partially reopened the earliest we can, like James said, while the weather is good, we can open windows, kids can, do some class time, teachers could take their classes outside, things like that. I think pushing it back 2 weeks, that's 2 weeks of good weather, of, non-cold and flu season, that's 2 weeks of precious time. And we could be discussing the middle of October, moving to a different plan, and we gave up 2 weeks of crucial in-person time. I don't think that that's in our students' best interest as long as our case counts remain where they're at.
Okay. So a yes vote on this will start us off remotely for the first 2 weeks after the first 10 days was given by the state. A no vote would bring us back to the drawing board. I would, on just my own personal thoughts on this, and I want to actually thank as well everyone who sent in communications to us. I really appreciate it. It really helped us a lot. I understand all of your feelings. I'm empathetic with all of them. The whole reason for doing that was to, as representatives of the town of Carver, to get input from the town of Carver and not pretend that we know everything, because we don't, but we wanted input from the parents and from the community, and we got that. We thank you very much. On this particular vote, I will just say that I cannot support this. I think the first 10 days was fine. I mean, we've gone now from, the state has determined for us to go from 180 days of education to 170 days of education without giving us any leeway or any role in the decision-making at all, but they're leaving all the rest of the decisions to us locally. So I didn't think that was right. So I will not be supporting this particular option, but I'm going to move ahead with the vote. All those in favor of...
Do roll call?
Oh, yeah, we'll do roll call. The vote is to reopen with the amendment, reopen in hybrid remotely for the first 2 weeks, to be reevaluated at the August 27th meeting. So Stephanie Clarity.
Stephanie Clarity, aye.
James O'Brien, no.
Jennifer Pratt, no.
Jason Greenwood, aye.
Andy Cottarelli, no. So the motion fails. All right, I would take another motion if anybody else has a Jen Pratt.
I make a motion that we approve option B as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Does anybody have any discussion about option B? Jason?
Same amendment.
Well, you made the motion, so I think you guys got it first, technically, right?
I just add Jason's same amendment, that it's reviewed. At
On the 27th?
August 27th meeting.
So you want to
yes.
make that amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
So,
Second, okay.
okay, so we have a motion, an amendment on the floor and a second to reevaluate this plan on August 27th as well. Roll call vote on the, this is discussion on the amendment, please. Any discussion? No discussion. All right, roll call vote on the amendment. Stephanie?
Stephanie Clarity, aye.
James O'Brien, aye.
Jennifer Pratt, aye.
Jason Greenwood, aye.
Andy Cottarelli, aye. So the amendment passes. Okay, further discussion on the amended motion. Jason?
The point that I'm stuck on with this, and I agree, 83% of the families want some sort of in-person return. But as the plan is written right now, we're leaving 17% of families behind without proper instruction. Now, once that's looked into more, that could change depending on who opts out, as Mr. Neef said earlier. But I'm very uncomfortable knowing that we have potentially 17% or more, or around 70% of families who will not have a teacher in front of them. And that's where I'm having the most difficulty with this. I want every student, we've worked so hard to keep kids in Carver. And I feel like if these students don't have someone a teacher in front of them, we're going to lose these kids, whether it's to an online platform, whether it's somewhere else. I want to keep the enrollment up. I want the best education possible for everyone. So that's really my sticking point at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. James O'Brien?
I don't think we're leaving 17% behind. I think that's an assumption, and it's a wrong one. I think that this is a fluid situation, and this is constantly going to change, and it's up to this administration to come up with a plan that keeps these children in contact. If you read the emails, most of that 17% seems to be kids that are in a high-risk situation, whether it's their family or themselves, that are in a situation where they can't make it in. They literally cannot make it in. So regardless of what we do, they cannot make it in. So we're not leaving them behind. What we have to do is make sure that we have a plan that doesn't just stick them on an online platform, but allows them personal contact with other students and with administration and with people that teachers, or staff, not administration, but staff that has the ability to assist and to make them feel connected, because they can't come in. And if you're when you go fully remote, you take away the choice that these people want. And no matter what, I'm not diminishing that 17%, but I don't know what business you'd be in where you wouldn't go with the 83% off. 83% of the people want to do this. And it's up to this administration to work hard to get that 17% the right opportunity they deserve, but not to make the other 83% not get what they want because of that 17%. Because most of those parents who wrote those emails said, I understand. I wish my kid could go back to school, but they can't. This is high risk. I just want my child to get more communication with their peers and with staff, and to be part of the Carver system. In that sense, you can't take a teacher and say, okay, you're going to teach an in-class situation and you're going to teach these remote kids. That's a double job. You can't give that to them. There are going to be high-risk teachers. There are going to be people in this district that aren't going to be able to come into these buildings either. There has to be some kind of system set up that over the next month that this district works on to get those kids a solid Carver education and a system that they deserve. We're not giving up on them. I disagree with that statement. I just think that we have to come up with a better plan than where it's at right now. But I think this is going to be fluid. Into 2021, this is going to be a fluid situation. We're going to be faced with constant meetings of how we're going to deal with what's happening at that time. And we're going to have to be ready for that. And I think diminishing the 83% by saying, we know you want your kids back in school, but I'm not comfortable with that. I would rather work with the majority and work to get that minority population much more connected with what's going on here in some way or another. And I think our staff has enough time to do something in that fashion, to work in that direction at least, to come up with something.
I'd like to recognize Scott for a second. He wanted to respond to that. And
Just
Jason,
a point of clarity. My point of clarity is utilizing a remote platform does not mean, and never meant, that the students would have no contact with a Carver staff member. And I think that that's been played out a little unfairly. But then ultimately, I have to take responsibility for that because I've been the one who's communicating the plan. Now, I'm not saying they're going to get live instruction every day from a Carver staff member. There's a distinction there. But certainly, it's not that they're going to have no contact from a Carver staff member. That was never the plan and never the implication of that plan. The platform does provide instructional videos. And we're going to have a staff member assigned to every student who is remote. They may not always be providing them with live instruction. There's a distinction there, and a very important distinction. And what I'm saying in my opening comment is I'm more than willing to look at those specific situations and look at the numbers to see if it makes sense. But sometimes the staff, all along the commissioner has been saying, it will just work out. Your staff will match out with those kids who need to be home. But the reality is your staff may not match up with those kids who need to be home. We might have a junior in high school who needs to take chemistry and pre-calculus and English and physics and environmental science. And we may have 3 elementary teachers, and I'm not saying they couldn't teach those subjects, but they're really not prepared to teach those subjects. But that doesn't mean we couldn't sign those teachers up. That doesn't mean we couldn't put the student in those classes in a platform and have staff members from the school supporting with them. And maybe it's our fault that we haven't defined that enough in saying, what does that support look like? That support looks like checking in with the student regularly 2 to 3 times a week, seeing what they need, seeing what their social emotional supports are. I just don't want the message to be being on a remote learning platform means you're totally disconnected from the school and you never see a Carver staff member. And if I've communicated that way, that's my fault. And I have to take responsibility for that. But that is not what we're presenting. Now, again, there's a nuanced answer there between, I'm also not saying, and I'm going to be very clear, I don't know if we can make it work that every single kid who chooses a remote platform is going to get full instruction from a Carver teacher all the time. I don't know if we can make that work, but it's certainly not, okay, you're on your remote learning platform and we'll check in next year. There's going to be regularly weekly contact with those students. We're going to invite them to participate in community activities. Some people have been giving suggestions to offer more, which we're going to have to work through over the next month. I know very specifically the elementary school, a lot of parents said, why can't they just join morning meeting every day with their class? We'll have to work with the teachers on that. We'll have to work with the administration on that. I'm not saying we couldn't do that. And those are all things we can look at. But I guess I'm just trying to clarify that message of that a remote learning platform means you're totally disconnected from the Carver Public Schools, because you're not. And then my other piece of this is, sorry, I just lost my other piece. Let's see if it comes back real quick. Oh, in terms of the remote, it came back real quick. In terms of the remote learning platform piece, there's the other nuance here is, even if you selected option A and we started remote for 2 weeks, there might be parents who are still going to say, I am not interested in transitioning on October 1st, so I'm going to select full remote. So you're still going to have that option. You're still going to have that group of people. And I don't know what the number is going to be. I don't know if it's going to be 17%. I don't know if it's going to be 15%. I don't know if it's going to be 10%, because we didn't really give that as a survey question. But there are still people going to say, that 2 weeks really doesn't make that much of a difference for me. So in my mind, what the 2 weeks does, it's not, the 2 weeks could give us more planning time for what the hybrid model might look like in terms of providing remote services for students who are remote. But it's really just to track the data and say, is there a summer surge? Give us an extra 2 weeks to take a look at that. In my mind, that's the real distinction between the two options. And the concerns about the remote learning piece are just going to have to be fleshed out through more discussion. I don't know if that was, so those are my points of clarity.
All right, thank you, Scott.
And I don't know if that created more confusion.
All right. Jason.
And this is in response to James, and I agree with the vast majority of what you said, and I don't want to diminish anybody or anything. I'm thinking procedurally in the document we have right now, and that's what Scott just clarified about. There will be a contact every so often. You know what I mean, like 2 or 3 times a week and things like that. Not the same as being with your peers. And that's where that number came from, and I was just uncomfortable with that many students not being, fully immersed in their school community because of situations that are out of their control. That's where it came from, and I kind of just wanted to clarify that as well, because that's a lot of kids. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Jen?
Jennifer Pratt. Yeah, a lot of parents that I heard from that need to go remote are very concerned with the remote platform. And the biggest concerns that I heard from people were ones that were elementary level. They're worried about their elementary students being on this online remote platform and it not being an education that's going to be equal to what they would receive in the elementary school. I heard significantly fewer complaints at the middle high school level. I think those kids are older and could probably handle an online platform better. I don't know how we do this, but I think that we should charge our administration with coming up with a plan for that elementary population, whether it be they participate in the Zooms on the hybrid days. If we can see if we can eliminate the online platform for the elementary level. I don't know if we have the staffing to do it, but if we can look at it, and we can always reevaluate at the August meeting, but I agree that we need to do something for those remote kids and for those families that need to go remote, but I don't think that it should impact when we begin the in-person learning for the rest of the population.
Thank you, Jen.
Mr. Chair.
Excuse me. You want to be recognized?
Yeah.
Okay, Stephanie, go ahead.
Stephanie Clarity. I just wanted to clarify, I understand that the calendar was reduced from 180 to 170 days to give us 10 days of PD for the teachers to use at the beginning of the school year. At one point, we did discuss seeing if we could use 5 up front and then 5 if we had to switch to a different model, which we were not able to do. We have to use those up front. So my thought process, I just wanted to be clear, with the 2-week remote, then turning to a hybrid on October 1st, based on metrics and numbers staying the way that they are presently, was to give the teachers, yes, they're going to have PD, they're going to learn about new COVID protocols, they're going to learn about new procedures, they're going to get to work on new technologies. I know that they've worked on making their remote teaching by Carver teachers more robust and more accountable and a more well-rounded experience for every student in the system. I just wanted to see those teachers have 2 weeks to implement that, 2 weeks to work on it before it's the normal every day. Because I feel that during the 10 days, I'm not sure how much time they're going to have to, well, they won't have time to work with students at that point. I wanted to see them have a few weeks to work on their remote platform with students. That way, if they had to pivot, they'd have that experience to work on. I mean, the kids, I'm sure, would be excited to say, hey, gee, in a couple of weeks, we're going to see you in the classroom if everything stays the way that it is. Granted, that could change. So I just wanted to be clear that it was just so the teachers could get that practice of the more robust remote learning plan and put everything that they've been learning over the summer and that what they'll learn in those 10 days of PDs that can be applied to technology in the classroom and improving teaching methods, to actually have a chance to use that before we started the hybrid model. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any further discussion on the amended motion to accept option B for hybrid to start on September 16th? All right. One other thing for the Zoom audience, Scott, did you have to announce that motion so they could hear it?
I'm not sure where they are in terms of hearing. I haven't seen any concerns
complaints?
about it.
Okay.
They did ask me to face the camera that way so they can see you. That's why my computer is facing all of you, so they can see you in the wide picture.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, seeing no other discussion on this motion, this will be a roll call vote. I will start with Stephanie Clarity.
Stephanie Clarity, no.
James O'Brien.
Aye.
Jen Pratt.
Aye.
Jason Greenwood.
No.
Andy Cottarelli, aye. Motion passes. All right.
All right.
So now we move on to the
Calendar.
revised school
Yeah,
calendar.
revised school calendar. Just give me a second. So the revised school calendar, based on 170 days, would have the first day of school starting on September 16th. We moved our half-days to Wednesdays, and the reason why we moved all our half-days to Wednesdays that would support our remote model, or our hybrid model, really. So the committee just voted the hybrid model to start, but if we ended up in the hybrid model at any time, all the half-days would fall on Wednesdays, which makes sense, because on the remote model, we have half-days. In the hybrid model, we have half-days. The only thing that shifts here that's kind of undetermined is we have 2 professional development days that were supposed to be before school started. And so we have 2 professional development days that we need to add into the calendar. And right now, we've left them open so that if we were to transition from one model to the next during the year, we could institute a professional development day in terms of doing that. So I did keep 2 professional days, one Friday, October 9th, before the Columbus Day weekend, and one the election day, because this building will be used for elections on Tuesday the 3rd. Those were planned professional development days, so I kept those in the calendar. The 2 that we were supposed to have before the beginning of school, which were originally going to be the 31st and the 1st, but have been taken over by those 10 days, in essence, the committee would leave open for us to insert as necessary during any transitions during the year. So that is and the first day of school would be September 16th for all students, which based on a remote model, I keep saying remote, based on the hybrid model, that would be a remote day actually. So the first day would be a remote day for all students, which would give the opportunity for teachers to meet with their classes, talk about what it's going to look like to come into school next day, talk about and we're going to do some training during that week as well for parents and having some of the specifics about what the policies, procedures, and protocols will be for the first day kids walk into the building, which would be Thursday the 17th. So Group B would start on Thursday the 17th.
Andy?
Yep.
James O'Brien. So Scott, so you're going to hold those 2 days sort of in your pocket to see when we need them kind of thing? That's not a negotiated thing, right? That's something you can use?
Yeah, so we're going to use them we're going to hold them in advance,
right,
and then use them as needed. And obviously, there is a recommendation coming up that the committee would meet on a bi-weekly basis. So if there was going to be a transition, the committee could vote to amend the calendar and insert one of those days.
Okay.
Jason?
Move to accept the revised school year 21 calendar.
Second, James O'Brien.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the calendar? Okay. Seeing none, are we doing all votes by roll call, or? Okay.
Mostly Zoom,
Yeah.
so we may as
Oh,
well.
for Zoom, that's right, okay. Okay, Stephanie Clarity?
Stephanie Clarity, aye.
James?
James O'Brien, aye.
Jennifer Pratt, aye.
Jason Greenwood, aye.
And Andy Cottarelli, aye, as well. It's unanimous.
And then the last thing for this evening is just updated copy of meeting schedule. This doesn't need a vote or action of the committee, but it's just a recommendation. We talked about meeting bi-weekly. So these would be the new dates for our bi-weekly meetings. The first one being August 27th, and then going 2 weeks. Right now I have every 2 weeks through December, but certainly we could make a decision after December to continue to meet every 2 weeks. And if the committee wants to make it every 2 weeks for the year, we can certainly do that, but I figured we'd reevaluate in January.
Okay.
So does anybody see any problems with these dates?
Oh, come on, Jay.
Any
You wanna see us every 2
You get the
weeks?
thumbs up from Jason. Any further discussion? On? Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, so
Thank you.
then our next meeting will be on the 27th.
And this is one of the reasons, no matter what model we chose, one of the things that would, actually Stephanie had brought to our attention is mainly, was more communication between the committee and more more meetings, and that way we could alter things on a quicker basis if we needed to, and we actually could even call meetings sooner if we needed to as well. But we wanted it through COVID, we wanted to make sure we were together more. Okay, so we move on to reports from the school committee. Anybody have anything? James?
James O'Brien. I'd just like to say I want to thank you guys for all your commitment to this, because this is really tough. I've been on the school committee for 9 years now and dealt with quite a few tough situations in this town in that time frame. But this is definitely the toughest, and this is really hard. And I think what everybody has to understand, that no matter what we decide, we're doing what we think is the best to do, but it's also a fluid situation and can change at any point. If, you know, we're willing to meet as much as we need to and address what we need to change what we need to, but with the data that we've been given and the amount of information that we've been given, I feel very confident in the decisions we made tonight. And I want to thank everybody for their input because, as Stephanie said earlier, it really does help make a decision, because I'm a fan of looking at every single side, and there's more than two sides to every story. There's a side for every person involved. So the more we hear, the more we're able to evaluate what it is that people really want, and it's our job to represent your voice, and I hope we did a good job with that through this situation. So thank you all.
Thank you, James. Jen?
Thank you, Jennifer Pratt. I completely echo everything that James said. Nothing about any decisions we've made tonight have been easy, and none of it has come lightly. And for those of you that might be sitting at home frustrated right now that we chose the vote we did, it's not that we didn't hear you. There was just no right choice. There was no choice that was going to please everybody, and as James said, we're really trying our hardest to do what's best for the overall community. I know that I personally will be at the ready to call a meeting to order to change direction at the slightest hint of something that might be endangering our community or our kids. Whether it's common sense that demands it because we see, you know, changes in the state metrics or other towns around us, or something that happens in our own town. Safety is always at the utmost importance, as is educating our kids. I just want to thank everybody for all their hard work. The work's not over yet. There's a lot that needs to be done in the next month before we open these doors to this building to kids. There's a lot of things that are going to need to be figured out and nailed down once we know people's final decisions and what they're going to opt in. And so the work's not over yet. And for everybody that is going to need to put in many long hours in August to make sure we're ready to open on September 16th, I thank you in advance for your time and dedication to this town. I think that we have an amazing administration, and we have an amazing set of teachers that I know are going to come in ready to teach our kids, and I thank all of you.
Thank you, Jen. Jason? No? Stephanie?
Yes, Stephanie Clarity. I also want to thank everyone that's been involved in the reopening committee, everyone on the school committee, absolutely everyone in our town, everyone that has had input and has worked countless hours to get us where we are now. And I also want to thank all of the families at home for advocating on behalf of what's right for your students. And I just want to make it clear that I completely, as I think everyone does, we understand that education can be a very personal decision, and that some families are going to have no choice but to feel that they have no choice but to choose the remote platform. And if that is the case, as Superintendent Neef had mentioned, and I think a lot of us have spoken about it, we want to make sure that our district is establishing those connections with your family as often as we can. So please keep advocating to us. Please keep reaching out with your thoughts and your suggestions and your concerns. This is very fluid, and your input is valued and appreciated. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'll go last then. Nothing, Jason? Sure, okay. I just want to thank everybody that came tonight, everybody that emailed us, as I said, everybody that texted and messaged us and comments, and all the input on social media, all the work of our administration and teachers are going to be going through to bring education back to the kids of Carver in an in-person manner. This health crisis is nothing that we take lightly. The truth of it is, I've been looking at the numbers for a long time, and even though things did creep up a little bit in the last couple weeks, it's been steadily going down in probable cases. I'm looking at the state website right now. It's been going down since July 31st. Yesterday, the state had 23 confirmed cases in the entire state. Today, so far, they're reporting none, which I hope continues. The numbers that, I just want to talk quickly about numbers. the peak was in mid-April. And if you go on the state website, you'll see graphs on the 7-day weighted average of positive molecular tests. Right now, since April 15th, the state of Massachusetts is down 94% since then. We're at 1.8%. On the 3-day average of number of COVID-19 patients in the hospital, we're down 89%. We had the number of hospitals using surge capacity, we're down 100%. Right, so in the 3-day average of COVID-19 deaths, we're down 92% since April 15th. So to not reopen now, I mean, I wanted to go full in person. I wanted to bring everybody back if we had the distance rule, the distancing, if we could accommodate it. And the truth is, we just don't have it right now. So until the data changes and things get relaxed by the state, this is what we have. And I'm really a fan of the goalpost, or the milestones Mr. Neef talked about reopening in full. And I want to see those implemented, and I'm going to make sure those are implemented with the will of the committee, if they agree with me, and with the administration, to get us all back into school. The bottom line is, we heard a lot about when it's safe, the quote-unquote when it's safe. When it's safe, a lot of times means never, because things can never be safe enough in a lot of situations. Everybody has a personal story about dealing with this disease. Everybody was afraid in the spring. I have a high-risk wife and a high-risk mother that I was doing all the shopping for and everything. And I wasn't too happy about going into places. And I know those things aren't like being in a classroom, but I mean, we say we're all in it together. Well, we're all in it together. And everyone has different jobs, and I haven't missed a day of work myself, just to put my own stamp on it. And in this state, especially in this country, we owe it to our children to give them an education. And I've heard from so many parents saying that and this isn't a knock on the teachers or anybody, this is just saying their child did not benefit from the remote learning. And I know it will be different from the spring, because the spring was thrown together. And Carver teachers will be involved in the remote learning, even with the online platform. But in this state, the tradition of education for public education goes all the way back to 1647. And I'll read it from you right here. I'm looking at from the General Court of Massachusetts Bay Colony decrees that every town of 50 families should have an elementary school, and that every town of 100 families should have a Latin school. Well, we don't have a Latin school, but you wonder where the Latin school in Boston came from. That's where. But we have a tradition of providing quality education for our citizens, and I know our staff will not let that end with this disease. And let's just pray that no one else gets sick, and everybody takes as many health precautions as possible. And I actually heard it's funny, I'll end with this. We've heard from several health workers, nurses, emergency room, ICU units, regular floor nurses. Some were for full remote, some were for reopen in full, some were for hybrid. But the last one I spoke to told me, you know what? We were all afraid. I had people, almost all coronavirus patients on my floor for at least 2 months. And with the right PPE and precautions, she said neither herself or any of her fellow staff members got sick. So I think if we can do the same thing here and be careful and make sure we adhere to that, I think we'll be okay. At least I pray we will. But I'm going to end with that. So thank you, everybody. I want to thank Area 58 for getting this out into the public for us, and I want to thank everybody's attention to this important item.
Ms. Carelli, if I could be recognized?
Yes, Mr. Neef.
So I guess there's some questions in the Zoom audience, and I think because of the reality of how we're situated right now, I'm willing to address those if the committee's willing to, in terms of what was actually voted.
Okay.
So if you're comfortable with me restating what was voted.
Let me just, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Anybody have any objection to that?
No.
Okay, neither do I. Proceed, please.
All right. And then just one other piece, just informational, a couple of informational pieces, which I wish I had done in the beginning because we've had a lot of people drop off the call. So what was voted was option B, a hybrid return K through 12 starting September 16th. And that would include preschool and some selected special ed students and high need students that would start in person. And that we would work with those families in those specific situations, that the preschool would return in person and that the certain special ed or high need students would return in person, and we'd work with families to do that. And making sure that everyone's understanding that that was the vote and what was approved by the committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Can I ask a question on that, Scott? Because I think part of the confusion that may be happening is what that hybrid model exactly means, as far as like when will my kid go to school, who's going to go to school.
So we do. So that's part of the point of clarification I wanted to do. So we will have an A group, which is A through L, which will attend school on Monday and Tuesday. They will be remote on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We'll have a B group. They'll attend school, which is M through Z, which will attend school on Thursdays and Fridays and be remote on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. And one of my points of clarification is, one of the things that came up last week, and then after some feedback and reflection with the administration and the committee, we've actually decided to offer people a hardship application. So I wanted to clarify that there's 3 things that are going to go. There'll be a letter going out to the community tomorrow, and in that letter I'm going to ask parents to do 3 things. Number 1, if you want to do a hardship application for your families to switch groups. So if you're A through L and Monday, Tuesday, you have a hardship for why that doesn't work for you, you can do an application. I'm not guaranteeing that all or any applications will be accepted, but we want to see what all the concerns are and see if we can work it out. Same thing, if you're in the M to Z group on Thursday and Friday, you can do a hardship application to switch to the other group. Being an optimist, I'll say that the number, I'll get 40 requests each way and we'll just switch them. I don't know if it will quite work out that way, but maybe. So we're going to give that opportunity. So people will be asked to do a hardship application if they want to, if they choose. Second thing is anybody who's going to take the bus, we're going to actually require people to request transportation. So the letter will very clearly state, please fill out this transportation request form. I honestly don't want to do it through a survey. I feel like that's going to miss too many people. I'm just going to reinforce you. And actually, this happens every year. If you remember in the spring, you actually get a transportation request form for you to fill out. It's almost the exact same form. We're just asking you to redo that, to recertify that I need the bus for the days that my kids are coming to school, and that will allow transportation to start building the bus routes, the bus runs, and getting all that information out. The third piece, and then I'll take a clarifying question, the third piece is, it will be a remote learning application. We're calling it an application, but you're going to be accepted. If your family if you're not going to participate in the hybrid model and you're looking to stay remote, we're asking you to complete an application. For our planning purposes, even addressing some of the issues we spoke to tonight about trying to match up our teachers and those students who are remote, we're going to ask everybody to do those things this week. So if by next Monday, if you can have in your hardship application, your transportation request, your request to be remote, that all that information helps us plan. And then obviously we're going to start planning before next Monday, but after next Monday we can really start breaking down some of those pieces and really getting into the nitty-gritty of the planning for the implementation of these models. So again, the letter will have link to all 3 forms. All 3 forms will be on the website. We'll try to make it as readily available to everyone. You can do it electronically. You can mail it to us. You can walk in and hand it in the office. We're going to have you be able to turn those forms in any way that you can. And that will all go home tomorrow.
Can I clarify one thing?
Yeah. Jason.
Oh, sorry, Jason.
For the transportation, I'd like to suggest maybe sending it to everyone and they either choose yes or no, so no one gets left through the cracks.
I think to solidify what he's saying, you said, as we've done in the past, but normally I don't have to do anything because my kids take the bus every year. I just want to make sure people know this year they have to fill out the form. I
feel like the letter's pretty explicit about that. They have to do it. It's in bold. The letter, it's going to get emailed home to everyone. I mean, I don't know, Jason, if you're actually suggesting that we actually physically mail it home to all.
No, I think he's just saying it should be you should write yes, so even people who don't want it should be returning it as well.
When we let our director.
Okay, so you're suggesting that everyone does the transportation form, and we collect a box that says, no, I do not need transportation.
And that would just make sure that we don't miss anyone. I know it's a big step, but then,
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
there's just a suggestion, that's all.
No, actually, that makes a lot of sense.
That way you get every family for sure.
Go ahead, Jen.
Just a point of clarification. I was one of those people who said, I would be interested in putting my kids in the bus, but I could drive them if necessary. How would you want me to respond? Should I respond, yes, I want bus transportation, and then if there's an issue, will something be coming out after the fact? And maybe Brad, this might be the best answer, but should I respond yes, but then, if there's issues, if there's too many kids that need busing, it can't be worked out, I could later say, okay, I'll drive?
Before you answer, Brad, just identify yourself and just for Zoom, identify yourselves, please.
Brad Brothers, Chief Financial Officer. So first thing I want to clarify is, Scott, the letter you mentioned, parents fill out if they're changing an address. So it's not like a guarantee that you sign it every year. So that's a little bit of a difference.
Sorry about
that. No, not a big deal. So that is what we're requesting be signed off from everyone. To be honest,
I think it makes sense that everyone do it and either yes or no.
correct. So we have it on file, absolutely. Jen, to answer your question, I would say you fill it out as yes, and then it's easier to backtrack than it is to add. Like, it's just easier to do it that way. So I would say if you are even interested in transportation, put your name on that list, because that's going to be our most accurate building of the routes anyway.
I would also like to throw in a request that if you can bring your child to school, that you make that effort to do that, but there's there's clear concerns with cafeteria, with bathrooms, with buses, and those areas that are going to be a big concern. When we're limiting the number of kids on the bus, we're going to be doing a lot of runs if people aren't willing to.
So the letter will state, everyone do it, but if you can drive your own kid, we'd love to have you do it.
If you can, I'm just, no.
Everyone fill out the form, absolutely. No,
Right. Only half of the kids are going to be coming on each day.
Right.
So you're limiting those numbers, but I kind of have a feeling that a lot of people might want to be driving their kids in as well.
Yep.
Do we have any other clarifying statements from?
No, I have no other clarifying statements. Oh, from Zoom, I don't think we have any other. Those were all mostly from Zoom. And then obviously I wanted to communicate that all this information is going to be going home tomorrow, and we're just asking for us from planning standpoint, it's going to be really beneficial if that information can be turned back to us as soon as possible.
Can I just add on one more thing about transportation before we go? Jen, the more I think about this, I want to say we should probably have on there that if you are agreeing to drive your child right off the bat, we're going to have a checkbox for that. So if that makes sense, you're going to have the option of saying yes, and that's what we're going to build our route space off of. But if you know right off the bat that you are going to drive every day, we're going to have you check that box off. So that way we don't add you in.
That's where I was going.
Yeah,
That was my original.
For me
that's what I just
personally,
meant.
driving my children would be a hardship because my workday technically starts before the school day starts. But if you needed me to do it, I would just start work earlier, work later. I'd make up the time and do it.
Gotcha.
To avoid double or triple bus runs. So I'm willing to sacrifice, and
Yeah,
my job is flexible enough that I can do that. But that's why I think I'm not alone in that scenario, so.
Sorry, too many people talking at once.
Yeah.
So that might, in my mind, that might be a second stage. Let's see where we are. Let's see what we get for returns. Get that back from everybody saying yes or no, I'm in for transportation. And if we feel like, hey, looking at even the hybrid model, we're looking at two runs for these 4 buses. Maybe we reach out specifically to those 4 buses and say, we're looking at 2 runs, because we have to meet the guideline at 23. Can anybody just help us out here? And so in my mind, that's kind of a secondary step, but an important one for us to look at.
And based on prior survey results, I'm going to say we're right at the line of having to do a double run. So it's going to be curious how that comes out, but hopefully we avoid all double runs.
All right, so what's important now is to get those forms that you mentioned
We
back
get
in
the
as fast
The
as
forms will all be
possible.
out tomorrow. They'll be on the website. They'll be emailed home to you, and just complete them as soon as you can.
Okay, and one more thing I just wanted to say that I forgot to mention before, or asked before, or just my own clarifying statement. On the online platform, the Edgenuity, I don't know if I didn't hear you say this before, but we know it. This is DESI approved, and this is something we've used before.
Yeah, so Edgenuity 6 through 12, and I know
That's all right.
So Edgenuity 6 through 12 is a program that we have used at the middle high school. We've had students on that program. We've had students do credit recovery. We've had students do their first full course load. Quite honestly, we've had students who've had faced medical challenges separate from COVID-19, who've stayed home with support and been on Edgenuity classes and had support from a staff member. This is not a new thing for us at the middle high school level. The elementary level is a little bit different because it would be new for us, and we haven't even approved what platform we're going to use, because DESE just put out their approved platforms last week. So we don't even know if it's going to be Edgenuity, if there is a platform.
Okay.
We're actually looking at the Florida Virtual School. We have a meeting with them tomorrow to see what their options are and offerings and go over it. So that remote learning platform specifically for elementary is we're going to be taking a look at that. It's going to be a work in progress.
And this is what our increased meeting schedule will be about, these type of things. But just on the question we got, a lot of us got about Carver staff not being used in these programs. Can you elaborate on that just a little more?
I'm not prepared to elaborate on that at this time.
Okay, but
because what I'm saying is we, as the administration, are willing to look at that.
All right.
And I'm saying staff, it might be educational support professionals, it might be teachers, but what I do want to emphasize is, which I'm restating what I said earlier, all along our intention was to have those students who are placed onto an educational platform supported by staff on a weekly basis. It wasn't going to be you're on the platform and we'll see you later. And if that's how people took from it, then I 100% apologize, because that was never the plan.
Okay.
In terms of using Carver teachers for live instruction, that's something we have to evaluate in terms of who requests to be remote. And I gave this fanciful example a couple times today, and it's probably pie in the sky and not realistic, so I don't think it's going to happen. But if we had 22 second graders say they're going to stay remote, well, we have 6 classes of around 22 kids in second grade, so then one of those classes would just become a full remote class with a full remote Carver teacher, because that makes sense. But if we have 3 second graders and 3 sixth graders and 3, it's more challenging. So we have to see who the kids are first to really answer that question.
right. And I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but I hope that if we do use Carver staff for any of this, I hope it's the people that the highest risk if they can.
Absolutely, it'll be those people who have either a personal risk or a risk within their family.
Right.
I would love to make a motion to adjourn regular session and head to executive session to
Second.
conduct strategy and preparation for negotiation collective bargaining with union personnel, not to return to regular session.
Okay, you got to second that again, Jen?
Second.
There you go. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Stephanie?
Stephanie Clarity, aye.
James O'Brien, aye.
Jennifer Pratt, aye.
Jason Greenwood, aye.
Andy Cottarelli, aye. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Just got to wait till we're off.